I'm Lisa Adams.
And I'm Mike Ruzzi.
On behalf of Erie News Now and WQLN, welcome to Election 2025, a debate in the Erie mayoral race between Democratic nominee Daria Devlin and Republican nominee Matthew Thomas.
Now, before the program, the candidates rolled dice to determine who will give the first opening statement and take the first question, and to determine the order of the closing statements. Daria Devlin won the toss. She will go first with opening statements and take the first question. Matthew will have the first opportunity for the closing statement.
Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for those opening statements and 1 minute for the closing statements and 90 seconds to answer the same questions throughout the debate, with 30 seconds for rebuttal if requested. Mike and I may ask follow-up questions too as warranted. We will rotate who answers first with each round of questions.
All right, let's begin with the opening statement. Daria Devlin.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa and Mike, and thank you to WQLN and to WICU for partnering today. I also want to thank my opponent, Mr. Thomas, for being with us, and to all of you that are watching at home. Thank you for joining us for this really important conversation about the future of our city. So, you know, it's hard for me to believe, but it was almost a year ago now that I announced my decision to run for mayor of the City of Erie. And when I did that at that time, and so many times throughout the past year, I've told people that I made that decision to run because I just love this city so much. My roots are deep in this community. I was born and raised in, I would say, one of Erie's original immigrant neighborhoods, the old Russian neighborhood on the Lower East Side of Erie. I grew up there in a wonderful childhood. I went to Pfeiffer Burley Elementary School, graduated from what was Central High School in the mid-90s. I raised my 3 sons here in Erie, all of them going to Erie's public schools as well. And after spending about 10 years as a stay-at-home mom, getting them off to a good start, I was able to build a career of service in our community. So started out working for the Erie School District, some of you probably remember, at a very difficult time in our district's history, taking us through all of the community work that was so important to advocate for our schools. I then worked at the Erie Center of Arts and Technology, doing a multi-million-dollar project on Erie's East Side, and now serve as the Director of Social Impact for the Hammett Health Foundation, where I'm addressing the social drivers of health to really try to understand what is impacting our community. Along the way, I've had opportunities for public service. Elected to the Erie School Board, just finishing my term there 4 years ago. I was appointed to the Port Authority Board and also the newly created CRIZ Authority. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about that today. And I've done all that because I really believe I am ready to lead Erie. In some ways, I feel my whole life has been leading me to this moment. I believe Erie's best days are ahead. I'm looking forward to talking today about the challenges we have to face together, but about the vision that I believe we can have to move Erie forward into that next chapter. Thanks for being here today. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Matthew Thomas.
All right. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to apologize to the audience. My opponent has sportingly agreed to be in the room with me today. I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm going to do my best here. You know, Erie is a beautiful city with more potential than almost any place I've ever seen. And it's filled with people from all kinds of different backgrounds and ideologies, Democrats, Republicans, independents, and there are just so many good people here. That having been said, the city's been ruled since the mid-1960s by one party, the Democratic Party. And during that time, we've lost nearly 40% of our population to places that are less ravaged by crime, less plagued by struggling schools, and that are creating jobs that can sustain families. I've elected to run as a Republican in this town, and I'm doing this because I believe that the city badly needs a change in direction. I believe that my opponent is a good person. I think that she is someone who really genuinely wants to make a difference. But because she's run to her progressive base throughout the election, I'm concerned that if she tries to crack down on crime on Erie's East Side, if she tells the City of Erie police that they need to arrest individuals and that they need to report individuals who are committing crimes who are not legally supposed to be in the United States to ICE, that if she focuses on real issues instead of controversies, as she did with her Drag Queens for Daria fundraiser during the primary, that her base isn't going to allow her to toe the center line that the city needs that focuses on solutions. I'm an attorney with over 1,200 cases worth of experience in criminal law. I have hundreds of cases in debt collection, defense, bankruptcy, immigration law, estate law, every field that you can imagine. I believe that I know how to balance the city's budget. I've helped clients before to get out of debt and get in a good place. I believe that I know what's needed to crack down on the rampant crime. I started this election when a 17-year-old was shot 3 houses down from mine.
All right, thank you for those opening statements. We'll begin our round of questioning with Daria, and we're going to start right on the budget. So you said in the primary campaign that the city has a structural budget deficit that doesn't bode well in the short term or in the long term. So tell us how serious that problem is in your view and what you plan to do about it. Cuts, new taxes, new fees, new revenue streams.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So of course, we talked in the primary and continue to talk about this. The budget crisis that's facing the city of Erie has to be at the top of our list. And I really liken this back to what happened in the Erie School District probably 25 years ago. You had a number of things that had continued to be kicked down the road. You had significant underfunding, of course, from our state, which we learned in our fight for fair funding for our schools. But when that happens and the bottom drops out, you end up with a structural deficit that significantly impairs the services you're able to provide. The city's own financial departments are projecting that by 2026, we could have a structural deficit at $9 million. That is concerning because if things are not done to stop that bleed, that structural deficit will continue to grow upon itself. But I've said this is not about cuts. Cuts can be made, and I do believe that there are places for more efficiencies at City Hall. But this is a revenue problem. This is connected to our significant population decline over the past number of years. We need more people living in the city of Erie so that we can increase the denominator in the equation, more people who are sharing the burden of the tax base in our city. That's where I want to focus, and I believe that's the key to our future.
All right, same question for Matthew Thomas. Talk about the budget problems that the city may or may not have in your view and what you would do to address any budget issues, cuts, taxes, fees, or revenue.
Thank you. So Erie, Pennsylvania has about $100 million city general fund. Last year we paid about $25 million into the pension fund for past employees. About 95% of our budget, unfortunately, and I'm not knocking the wonderful people that work for the city, but about 91% of our budget is tied up in employee-related costs, whether it's past pensions. And so as my opponent indicated, we do have a revenue problem, and it's difficult to solve. And I agree that the problem is growth. We need, in my opinion, to eliminate or at least reduce the $52 local services tax. That's costing, or cost of doing business tax as it's sometimes referred to. That is costing employers that much money for every employer, or excuse me, for every employee, for every year in which that person is employed. That might not be a big deal to businesses that only have 1 or 2 people working there, but you start getting dozens of employees, and that can drive businesses out of the city. One of the biggest things that, to be honest, my friends have told me that is causing them to leave the city is that if they step over the property line into Mill Creek, if they go to Harbor Creek, I have a colleague that commutes regularly to Corey, the property taxes are so much lower, and that allows them to have a nicer house. So we need to reduce the property tax. That's a specific measure that we can take. I do think that we have to go through the budget with a fine-tooth comb. It's not a perfect solution, but there are things that we can get rid of. So I believe that the key is growth.
All right, our next question is for Daria Devlin. The city purchased the Miller Brothers property for $2.7 million. Will the benefits, Daria, match the cost? What does this mean for taxpayers?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This is a really difficult question, and I was asked about this during the summer. I really have concerns about this project, and I'm mainly concerned about it because beyond the cost of the purchase, which was already done, we're looking at probably a $30 to $35 million renovation price tag. That's concerning to me. City Council went ahead and they did pass a bond issue on this. So at this point, phases 1 and 2 of that project are being funded through a bond issue. I have concerns about where we're going to find the debt service for that, but at this point it's done. I will say, part of phase 1 of that project is really to support our fire mechanic program that was currently at Marsh Street. I've been in that building. It is dangerous. Our firemen did need to get out of there. So I did support the move over to Miller Brothers for that part. But I got to be honest, beyond that, I really think we need to look at this project, really understand the investment we're making here. I want to say about public safety, and my opponent alluded to it, I have been endorsed by the FOP. I have gone on ride-alongs with them all summer long. I understand their needs. Miller Brothers, I think, is something we need to look at, but we also need to make sure we can keep a full complement of police and we can really ensure public safety for our residents.
Matthew Thomas, same
Thank you.
question for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I also have concerns about the cost of the project, but I definitely, to be honest, I do really want to make sure that our first responders have a safe and healthy environment to go to so that they can focus on that every day. It is one of the things in the city that I think we've started to do well, but we need to continue with. Where we have projects, we need to seek private equity. The Erie Downtown Development Corporation, which my opponent had also alluded to, is something that is renovating downtown and even participating in some public projects using, again, equity and money from the private sector that is not costing the taxpayers anything. So if I was mayor, one of the things that I would do is to ask private investors, that have a stake in the city, such as Erie Insurance, just, to start with, to help with those kind of projects. I do agree that, it is a problem when the city takes on more burdens than they have right now. I've also worked with the FOP. I've spoken with them. We do need more officers in the city. One of the things that we can do along those lines is to eliminate the requirement that police officers live within 15 miles of the city. That's something that they've requested specifically. I want police officers to be attached to the community, but we have the room within the budget right now to hire good police officers. And there are a lot of police officers at outlying departments that want to come and work for us, and they can't right now. So.
Lisa, can I have 30 seconds?
Yes.
I want to be clear, though. We are at the full complement of police right now. We have 194, I believe, policemen. We do not have additional money in the budget for them. In fact, just this morning, I spent time at City Council's finance meeting where we talked about the fact that 25 of those police officers are actually being funded through ARP dollars. Now, thankfully, to the city's benefit of additional grant writing, additional dollars have been found, additional grants to keep them on. But as of right now, that funding in 2029 will expire, and we'll have to decide how to keep those 25. So we need to be smart about our public safety dollars, make sure we're prioritizing what we need.
All right, thank you. We're going to turn now to housing, and I'll address this to Matthew first. There's been a lot of talk about developing more affordable housing with Infinite Erie involved, Hammett Health Foundation's Build involved, an effort called Housing First. Are these projects so far bearing fruit? Where can city residents see signs of progress, and have any of these efforts reduced the homeless population so far?
Yeah, so that is an issue I wanted to talk about there during this debate. We do have a significant homeless population in Erie. I know that the estimates vary. I've heard as few as 100. I've heard significantly higher than that. Those projects, which the county has also become involved in, are important projects for us to continue. That having been said, one of my goals as mayor is to reduce the homeless population. And as a criminal defense attorney, I know this may upset some people, but one of the biggest issues that we face in terms of reducing the number of people who need those services is cleaning up the drugs off our streets. In response to what was just said, we do actually have more money, as was indicated, through 2029 for police officers. We have an issue where I think, I'm not going to say the specific number because there are police officers that are worried about their safety if people know how low it is, but there are far, far too few police officers on our streets during any given shift. They can barely manage as it is. If we clean the drugs off our streets, which contribute enormously, I see this in hundreds and hundreds of cases, to the homeless problem, if we also help get people mental health through Torrance, Gardenzia, Pyramid, Stairways, all these wonderful mental health organizations that we have in their communities, we can help make them productive members of society, get them back with their families, and get them reintegrated into the community.
Daria, I'll direct the same question to you. Obviously, you've been working in this space most recently, but talk about housing. All these efforts, all these initiatives, all these buzzwords, is it really making a difference yet, and has it reduced the number of homeless?
I hear you, Lisa, and I would probably bet that many of our residents feel the same way. A lot of talk, what have we actually seen? So let me say, we have a housing crisis in our community across the continuum. That's from chronically homeless folks all the way up to middle market rate housing. In fact, Infinite Erie's latest data shows we are 6,000 units short of housing in the city of Erie, and that includes 3,000 units for the most deeply affordable. Those are for folks that need to pay about $500 a month in rent. We have a supply problem. Now, I want to talk about homelessness. It's only part of the problem, but let's talk about it because I know it's one of the ones that's most at the forefront for folks. Homelessness is, in essence, a housing problem. People are on the streets. We call them homeless because they don't have a home. They don't have a place to go. And I think that much of the bad behavior that we see is because folks don't have the dignity of a private bathroom. They don't have a place where they can shower every single day in private. I have worked as a volunteer in overflow shelters at my own church, and I would tell you that shelter living is not for anyone. 50 humans sleeping in the same room is not all right. So our work at Build CDC to create 22 units for the chronically homeless, that's a project at 21st and SAS. That project is going to be open in 2026. Progress is being made, but much more work needs to be done, and it is collaborative. We need effort at every single level, nonprofit, private investment, philanthropy, to really solve this problem for our entire community.
Just one quick follow-up then, in light of what your opponent said about the drug problem related to the people that we see on the streets. Can you address that? Because certainly we know you can't even go to the city mission if you're using, so there are some places that turn you away unless that other problem can be addressed first.
So Lisa, you mentioned Housing First Erie, and that is the effort and the initiative that we're working on. Housing First Erie says this: you house people first. You get them in a home, and that is the project of 21st and SAS that we've been working on. That is a permanent supportive housing facility, which means you give residents a lease and an apartment of their own, but you provide them with aggressive services to make sure that they're dealing with the problems that probably put them on the street in the first place. So you're dealing with their addiction, you're dealing with their mental health, you're dealing with perhaps some of the behavioral health issues you have. This is the solution in our community. We're just getting started. Absolutely, behavioral services are needed.
This question is for Matthew Thomas. Is city government, Matthew, done enough to address the blight problem in Erie?
So I think that one thing that Mayor Schember has done, and that I am very happy about, he started to ask private contractors to volunteer their time to help clean up some of the blight issues, especially as they're related to private homes. We do need better code enforcement. Again, that's why I think that we need more police officers and more code enforcement officers. To be honest, the blight problem relates directly back to the economy. The simple fact is that if you do not have an economic reason for people to invest in their neighborhoods, if people in their neighborhoods or in certain neighborhoods are struggling to find good jobs, they don't have the money to clean up their homes. When industry moves out of Erie, we've seen this all along 12th Street. Again, same party rule for 55 years, and we've lost 40% of our population. So when all those businesses move out of the city and they leave these empty buildings, we can send code enforcement to yell at them and tell them that they have to clean it up. But the reality is that until we start bringing the population back, the buildings are not going to be fully fixed up. Private residences, even I, as someone who grew up pretty poor, who fought my way through college, who's now managed to pay off his house, pay off his cars, save up money, create good investments. The reality is that even I still struggle with the expensive projects on my house, and I know that a lot of people do.
Daria, Devlin, how would you address this problem of blight?
So Erie Refocused was our comprehensive plan done by the city, and it's hard, I think, for many people to believe that was 10 years ago now that Erie Refocused came out. That was the Buki plan, and the Buki plan said we needed to deal with blight in our neighborhoods. It was the #1 thing. And I will also give credit to the Senate and Schember administrations. I think they have worked to deal with blight. The problem is this: we've been knocking down homes and not infilling them with more supply, and I think that's a significant thing that we need to rectify. I think it has led in some cases to this lack of supply in our community. We're dealing with blight, but now we need to turn to building. I do want to talk about code enforcement for a minute as well. There's a difference between commercial code enforcement for businesses that are vacant and residential code enforcement. Commercial code enforcement very often is the place where I think we could actually be making more fees. This is a place where we could be looking throughout our community to say, if you're a business owner and you're not taking care of your property, that's who we should be going after, not our homeowners. But even with our homeowners, I'd like to see us get to a place of proactive code enforcement. That means going to our homeowners and offering them assistance with grant dollars, with programs, so that they can stay in their homes, so that they can make their homes safe. The vast majority of people, they want to be good neighbors as well. They want to make sure that their homes are safe and they're not contributing to perhaps even health problems of their own. So we need to move to that, to proactive code enforcement, and give our neighbors the opportunity to do better in our neighborhoods. This is the key to growth and population increase in our city.
May I have a very brief
Yes.
response to that? So I definitely understand, and I if we can get grant money in, that's always good. Here's the problem. All these programs that are being discussed, we've been here, we've done this. For decades and decades, we've heard the same stories over and over again. We're going to get a new program in, we're going to get a new grant. That's going to fix everything. Daria talked briefly about the need to rebuild in homes that were condemned, maybe, that have been torn down. But that doesn't help if the population keeps fleeing.
All right, one quick follow-up along that line. When you're talking about filling in the spaces where houses have been torn down because of blight, who funds that development of new housing?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, and I think this is really what everyone's wondering. But when we have coordinated efforts on city challenges, like we do now under the leadership of Infinite Erie, there is a process in place to create a housing accelerator fund. And that fund would be created initially from some private investment who would kickstart it and then be able to go out and work with our local banks. We've already had those conversations with some of our local lenders that they could put some dollars in and do some lending. So a fund is actually being created, has nothing to do with tax dollars. It's all privately funded. It's creative financing. I'll say to folks myself, when I did the project at 6th and East Avenue for the Erie Center for Arts and Technology, we used a $12 million new market tax credit that no one had ever used before. These financial tools are out there. We need leadership to bring them to Erie.
All right, we're going to move on to the CRIZ, and this question goes to Daria first. The Erie Downtown Development Corporation has certainly sparked development downtown. Your opponent alluded to that. So is the CRIZ designation, this tax capture tool for investment, is it really the next game changer? How important is the city's support for the new CRIZ authority, and do you have specific things that you hope that will happen from this tool?
Yeah. The CRIZ is a game changer. We talked about this in the spring. We'll continue to say this. The way that the current legislation is structured, Erie could benefit from $15 million a year for 30 years of taxes not being raised, taxes being returned into our community for investment here. And you ask about the priorities of that, the CRIZ can be a phenomenal tool to spur economic development. And specifically for me, I'm very interested in how we can use the CRIZ to build up our Bayfront. Our Bayfront district is our gem. This is the place where we can both drive tourism, drive economic development, hopefully drive significant property taxes on some of our prime real estate. CRIZ dollars can do that. They can provide infrastructure. They can bring infrastructure to developments that might have been difficult to bring developers in on. This is where I really think the CRIZ can shine and show that this is something that we can have a master plan to build and really ensure the future of our community. We need to use this tool wisely, however. And I will say that I have been involved in the CRIZ Authority since its inception. I was appointed by Representative Mirsky to that authority. I intend as mayor to stay very closely connected to it to make sure that the investments being done are equitable and they are also in line with the vision for moving our city forward.
Matthew, you have mentioned EDDC. You have also mentioned private dollars, certainly. So your thought on what, if mayor, you would do to support the CRIZ and the CRIZ Authority, and do you have specific things that you think it should be used for?
Yeah, the CRIZ has brought, at the latest estimate, probably $100 million in private investment into Erie, and it's exactly like you said. The thing is, what I want the money to be used for is to the development of sustainable businesses. So businesses, not nonprofits, because nonprofits, this has come up in the course of this election, nonprofits can be wonderful, but unfortunately they do not contribute to the tax base of the city. So I want this to be, to focus on bringing in businesses that intend to stay, businesses that do contribute to the tax base, and ideally bringing some of our industry back. This is an ideal time in American history to focus on reshoring. GE has, and I'll get back to the CRIZ in a second, but GE is reshoring thousands and thousands of jobs. They're reopening plants in Kentucky and across the South. I'd like to try to bring back some of those jobs, whether through that company or anything else, and having this tool available to us, that's an excellent tool. Again, it's brought in probably $100 million in investment, and this is what happens when we don't take people's tax dollars away, when we don't send tax dollars to Washington, D.C., when we don't send tax dollars to Harrisburg, when we keep them local in our communities. I've talked about this in the debate about lowering property taxes, about getting rid of the local service tax. You can see what a difference that makes.
Matthew, we'll start with you on this first question here. Erie has an abundance of fresh water, the Great Lakes Port, rail, airport, hospitals, all these great assets. Should we be doing a better job attracting new companies and jobs to Erie?
Yeah. So I believe that the Don John Shipyard is going to be under new ownership. We are actually doing that right now. We're attracting wonderful new shipping jobs into the Erie area. And I'm sorry, could you repeat just the second part of your question?
Just that, should we be doing a better job to attract new companies, more jobs to the area? With all these great assets.
It's an enormous resource. You talk about fishing. Obviously tourism is a thing. I don't want our local economy to be completely reliant on tourism because, it's a pretty cold city 6 months out of the year. So we have to be a little bit careful with relying on that. But, we are obviously redeveloping the Bayfront. I know that Brent Davis's administration, and the state have got, a huge project going on down there to improve Bayfront transportation. I think that we do need to try to get some businesses on the Bayfront that offer services that aren't currently being offered down there. There aren't enough restaurants down there right now to fill the need, so we need to try to fill existing gaps. But
Daria, Devlin, with all these great assets, what else can be done?
Sure, and I do want to say just very clearly that the PennDOT project, the Bayfront Improvement Project right now is a PennDOT project, it's a state project. I'm not sure how much local government has been involved, but certainly we're grateful to Governor Shapiro for making that happen. And it's funny, as you were asking the question, Mike, I was thinking, my dad called me last week. He had gone out to visit Presque Isle, and he said to me, I know you're very busy, but I think you need to go out and just spend an hour on this amazing resource we have to remember why we love this city so much. And I was too busy, I couldn't get out there to do that, but it was a reminder of this resource that we have. And I think as Erieites, we need to reshape the story that we want to tell about ourselves. We can be talking about the fact that this lake, in addition to being beautiful, in addition to being a source of fresh water, also provides us with climate resiliency, with stability. These are things we should be marketing about our community. These are things we should be going out and talking to folks about why they could move to Erie. Yes, the winters are bad, but man, the summers are gorgeous, and we have climate stability, and you can work from home here. So in addition to the tourism and to the economic development, we need to be selling this community as a wonderful place to live on a gorgeous lake that's going to protect us from extreme climate, that's going to give us access to fresh water. I think this is part of the rebranding that Erie needs to do, and I'm ready to stand in the front of that and make sure, again, this contributes to our growth.
The next question is about population loss, but a couple of other ideas are in my head from the discussion so far. So, Matthew, you talked about lowering property taxes. At the same time, we're talking about the fact that the city has a revenue problem. Daria, you talked about people should move into the city and take on some of the tax burden. That doesn't sound very appealing. So talk about the population loss issue. Several mayoral administrations have said, we need to do something about the population loss. We need to make it more attractive for people to live in the city. Why can't we do this turnaround and become the state's the third largest city again?
Yeah, so after I won the primary, one of the first things I did was I traveled to Allentown because I wanted to meet with the mayor of Allentown and ask him the question. Allentown overtook Erie as the third largest city in Pennsylvania a number of years ago. And so I went and met with Mayor Turk, wonderful man, and I said to him, Mayor Turk, what are you doing in Allentown that we need to be doing in Erie? Because we're coming for you. We want that third slot back. And so, we laughed and he talked about their proximity to New York City and kind of a corridor, and some of that's not really relevant to us. But when I think about what we need to be doing, you're right, Lisa, lots of mayors talk about it, but what's the plan? How do we rebrand ourselves? How do we go out and actively recruit both people and businesses to be in our community? And, my opponent talked about GE and kind of the old big employers we had. The other thing we have are amazingly strong, I would say, mid-sized family-owned businesses. These are businesses like Curtsy and Fralo out on West 12th Street. These are businesses that are growing and need our support and could be growing more. So my other hope is to meet with these business owners and say, what do you need? You need talent, you need land, you need transportation, you need an airport. That's something we should be talking about. Let's make sure they're getting what they need to grow. That will immediately lead to that growth. And I want to say, to your point about property taxes, look, it's an equation. We know how much we need and we know how many people can spend into it. All I'm saying is the more people that are paying in, hopefully the lower amount, because we know costs aren't going down. Costs will probably continue to rise. We need more people in that equation with us.
I live in the city, by the way,
I
so
know you
I'm doing my part for that tax burden. All right, so let's turn to Matthew now and talk about this population loss question. Again, several mayors have been watching the population get smaller and smaller. We do have an influx of new Americans, but why can't we seem to, and even the EDDC has created a lot of new housing downtown. Why is it not enough to help turn this around?
Well, first, Lisa, would you be willing to potentially pay just a little more in property tax? No, look, it's not about rebranding. The three things that people are constantly bringing up as to why they move out of the city, and I've had so many friends that started out, they have kids, they have young families, they'd be great additions to the city's population. The three things that every single one of them have brought up are failing schools. Okay, my opponent, right, God bless her, but she was the president of the school board. The Erie High School has the lowest graduation rate at, I believe, 77% in the entire county. Northeast is the next best at around 89%, and then everything's up from there, so everything else is about 90% or higher. It's getting better schools. It's reducing crime, like I've talked about over and over. It's reducing property taxes. Those are the three things that people mention. And crime is something that can be easily and effectively reduced in our city so that we don't have, packages being stolen off porches, don't have violent crime, we don't have drugs in our public parks. We can instruct our police officers, it's a simple instruction, oppose reducing bail for repeat drug and theft offenders at preliminary hearings, and stop offering, because police officers get an enormous amount of input into this and oftentimes flat out represent the Commonwealth at preliminary hearings. Don't allow easy deals for repeat theft and repeat drug offenders in our city.
Thank you.
Our next question is for
Can I
Daria.
have a rebuttal?
Go ahead, sure.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I got that one. I do want to say something. First of all, I want to say I wasn't just the president of the Erie School Board. I am proudly a member of the Erie School Board, a proud graduate of Erie's public schools. Our schools are not failing because we don't have strong families and excellent students and the best staff in the county. If our schools struggle, it's because they are a mirror held up to our community, a community that is wrought by child poverty. Erie has the highest child poverty rate in all of the major cities of Pennsylvania. It is a city that is wrought with trauma and the effects of poverty. And if we look at our schools and we're concerned, we know these are the impacts of the community that we've been allowed to create. I guarantee you that if we bring those issues up, you're going to see much different success in our schools.
And may I have just a very brief?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We no longer support teachers in our public schools. When teachers have to discipline children, when teachers have to hand out a failing grade, we allow parents to put tremendous pressure on those teachers, especially when kids are on sports teams or have some other significant role in the school. Administrations, including school boards, are not backing teachers up. Erie's teachers face violence in schools every day. We just had another serious incident down at the Erie High School.
All right, thank you.
All right, this next question is for Daria Devlin. With new administration, obviously change, what are you looking for in a police chief, a fire chief? Do you expect change in those leadership positions?
Look, Mike, I'm really focused on winning this election right now, right? And we see tonight, we have a lot of things to talk about over the next couple of weeks until we reach November 4th. So that's really been my focus. And, what am I looking for in certainly, at least with the chief of police? I'm looking for a chief that's going to share my vision for a strong Erie, a safe Erie, but also an Erie that understands that community policing is critical. An Erie, a chief that understands that our police department needs to be in touch with our residents and needs to understand the challenges that they face as well. So that's what I'll be looking for, not just in a police chief, to be honest with you, but in all of my administration at City Hall. And when I begin to think about, who do you want, and you get this question over and over again, I want to build a strong team that will also be able to go into City Hall and support the amazing employees that already work there. These are people who do difficult jobs every day. They pick up our garbage, they go out on code enforcement sweeps, there are cops, there are firemen. We need to protect these folks. And even when I hear about things like cutting property taxes, You know, part of our property taxes, a huge amount of them, go to support the services that we need to provide. I think our taxpayers, while I know they don't like to pay the tax, would feel better at least if we're providing good service. Our folks in City Hall are doing their jobs. They need strong leadership to help them, and that will be one of the first things that I do if I'm elected in my administration.
Matthew Thomas, what do you want to see in a fire chief or a police chief? What are you looking for?
Yeah, it's very simple. I want to see a police chief who cracks down on crime, and I want to see a fire chief that protects our citizens. It's that simple. Community policing is not the answer. We can have neighborhood watch organizations, those I do support, but the concept of community policing, which has started to come up and be discussed, is this idea that we can kind of just deputize people from the community and trust that they'll keep order within their own neighborhoods. They can't. They don't have badges. We've seen this in Chicago. We actually just saw a huge scandal in Chicago where an individual who stood beside the mayor of that city and got sworn in as someone who would be involved in community policing was now caught in a crime. The solution to our city's problems is to have the police clean up the drugs, clean up the streets, crack down on theft crimes, and definitely, and the Erie Shot Spotter system has been instrumental in this, but crack down on violent crimes as well. The only thing I care about in a police chief, I don't care about the color of anyone's skin. I don't care if they agree with me politically or not. I don't care, what their private views are on anything. The only thing I care about is that they do their job and that they focus. Building relationships in communities is good, but honestly, what I really want is just for them to come down on crime and let people know that they cannot terrorize our citizens anymore.
Mike, I'm sorry, can I just have very quickly? First of all, I just want to make sure everyone understands violent crime in the city of Erie is on the decline. Violent crime is absolutely going down. It's lower than it has been. So I don't want folks to have some fear in them that violent crime is on the rise. It's not. We have issues with domestic violence. We have issues with drugs. We know that. But our police are doing an excellent job of solving our violent crime issues. I also want to say this. Community policing to me is not deputizing community members. Community policing is the police being in the community, knowing the community, building relationships with the community. It's things like when I go to neighborhood watch groups, every month I see a police officer there listening to our citizens. That's community policing. That's what I want to make sure we do more of.
One brief response, if I may, in return. We cannot gaslight the people of this city. There are over 2,000 criminal dockets, each involving usually multiple crimes that come through the Erie County Court of Common Pleas every single year. That does not count the thousands upon thousands of dockets that get pled out for lower level crimes at preliminary hearings, usually for things like theft from our stores. There has been a slight improvement over the last 5 or 6 months in violent crime in the city. That is it.
All right, the next question, since we're kind of talking about community policing and trust and so on, is I'm going to address this to you first, Daria. City police were not involved in the fatal shooting of parolee Marcello Woodard, but family and friends have certainly demonstrated for justice all around the city. The demonstrations have been peaceful but very emotional. Do you have concerns about the impact of this incident on the progress that's been made in police and community relationships?
You know, Lisa, the night that Cello was killed, I got a call from a community member who told me what had happened. And, my initial thought was, every time we lose a life in the city of Erie, it is cause for pain and it is cause for pause. We need to take a moment and understand what led to this, and we need to stand with a family who is grieving. And beyond anything else, a life is lost, a family is grieving, and this is something that we need to stand with. Do I worry about progress being lost? I don't, because I truly believe this is going to lead us forward with a better relationship. What I would like to see come out of this terrible tragedy, first of all, is knowledge for this family who deserve to know ultimately what happened to their loved one. But secondly, I want this to lead to greater conversations between our community members and our police within our communities to talk about how do we support parolees when they're coming out of incarceration? How are we managing that transition for them? What are the supports that they need? How do we minimize these negative interactions that can happen? Where are the policies like body cams for parole officers that need to be put in place? I think we can find something out of this to make our community better. But in the meantime, stand with this family and grieve with them as they lost someone near and dear to their hearts.
Matthew, the same question for you. Certainly, we know it's not a city problem specifically, but these demonstrations are happening around the city. People are concerned about what happens when a decision comes down.
Right.
Is this setting us back in terms of police and community relationships?
Well, it shouldn't be. First of all, I know, and people attached to my campaign have had conversations with the family. I know that the family is just asking for answers. They just want to know what's going on. You know, as someone who's involved with the justice system every day, it moves incredibly slowly. There's a limited amount that we can do about that, but I want to try to make sure that we get people answers as fast as possible. As far as the incident itself, obviously we are awaiting the results of investigation. It was a state parole officer who was involved here. It was not one of the members of the Erie City Police. To my understanding, the extent of the involvement of the Erie City Police was to try to provide life-saving measures after this had happened, and so, you know, I really have to compliment them on the job that they're doing. To address something that was briefly mentioned, practically all of our city police are constantly wearing body cams at this point. I don't think that this needs to destroy the relationship between the police and the community, but, you know, obviously there's always more to be done.
If I could just clarify, yes, I understand that all police officers wear body cams. I'm talking about the legislation for parole officers to do the same. Thank you.
All right, Daria, the next question for you. Let's rewind to November of 2024, around Thanksgiving time. What is your plan in place in case we have another major snowstorm? And how do you think the city did almost a year ago?
Yeah, let's hope we don't, Mike. We just got done talking about what a wonderful summer we've had. Gosh, that was a once-in-a-lifetime storm. I think we're all very aware of that. However, it did, I believe, raise a concern about the city's preparedness in emergencies. Now, you know, when we saw the response there and we heard there's more snow than we've seen, our plows were getting stuck, I think we could have done some infrastructure improvements, maybe to have plows that could handle this amount of snow. Maybe we could have been out letting people know we knew the storm was coming, getting them to move their cars. But all of that aside, emergency preparedness for a city is a core mission. And so one of the things that I've learned since that time is that we have fallen down a bit on kind of the constant preparedness and the committees and the planning that we need to have. This will be an immediate priority of my administration. Fire department, police, all of our emergency personnel, we need to be prepared for something like snow, which in many cases was a minor inconvenience, for some, of course, more concerning. But my goodness, all the way beyond that, we need to be prepared for every situation. This will be a priority of mine. I hope that it's nothing worse than snow next time, but whatever it is, we need to be ready, and I'll ensure the public we will be.
Matthew Thomas, same question for you. What is your plan in case it happens again? And would you ever hesitate to call people off of vacation time to come in an emergency situation like that?
And this is exactly it. This has been called a once-in-a-lifetime storm, okay? I don't recall, and I think most people don't recall, the exact number of inches that fell this year versus previous years. But the truth is, we had a really similar storm in 2017. We live in the city of Erie, Pennsylvania. This is the single most predictable disaster that could possibly come upon us. As my opponent said, I think both of us sincerely wish that nothing worse happens to the city, but there were, and that's exactly it, there were snowplow drivers who were on personal trips. It's not their fault, okay? These were approved by the city, by the mayor's office. Nothing against Mayor Schember, but they were approved, where they were caught out of place on things like hunting trips, many, many miles away when we needed them most. For residents who live in the city, we watched as the streets were not salted, at least not salted fully, in preparation of this storm. We all saw the ice that built up and built up inch after inch after inch on the streets as a result of that. Even once we got the snow plowed off, the salt was still there. One thing I think we can do is we can help organize community groups to be prepared, individuals who are physically capable to be prepared to help volunteer to dig their neighbors out. America is a country with a tremendous history of volunteerism. This has been noted in our country all the way back to the 1800s. Alexis de Tocqueville, a French observer, couldn't believe how much Americans were always volunteering for things when he visited here again in the early 1800s, shortly after our nation's founding. But this is something we need to do a lot better job of.
All right, we're going to shift gears now and talk about immigration. As the nation wrestles with issues surrounding immigration, our region really has a very large new American population. So Matthew, for you first, are we doing enough here in Erie to help new Americans or immigrants become citizens and contributing members of our community? and your thoughts on the ICE activity that's been going on here in our region.
Look, Erie has a long history with immigration. But before we do anything else, I want to stop families, if it's at all humanly possible, who have been here for generation after generation after generation, stop them from leaving the city before we focus on anything else. I welcome anyone who wants to come here, I do. If they're going to be a contributing member of the community, if they're going to pay taxes, add to the tax base, that's excellent as long as they're coming here legally. If they come here illegally and they commit crimes within the city, and we've seen some, small minority, but some who are not supposed to be here commit violent crimes. They've also been involved, for those who are involved in the criminal defense community as attorneys in the criminal bar. We've seen a lot of drug trafficking and a lot of drug shipping from people who aren't supposed to be here. Currently, Erie is a quote-unquote welcoming city, where City of Erie police officers are at the very least not strictly ordered to report individuals who commit crimes and who are not supposed to be here to ICE. I will change that. If someone wants to come here and they are peaceful, we welcome them. If they commit a crime here, they're going to be out the door.
Daria, same question. Are we doing enough with the new Americans who come here? Certainly we have regular naturalization ceremonies, but I think there are still a lot of people under the radar who are not citizens yet. Can we be doing more to help them? Does that fall to the city in any way? And talk about the population problem relating to the immigration.
Look, Lisa, we're at 92,000 people, I think, right now in the city of Erie, and I'd venture that number would be even lower if we hadn't had the waves of immigration in our community over the past number of years. I challenge you to spend a summer in Erie and not fall into an ethnic festival. We start ours down in the Russian Festival. We just had the Irish Festival a few weeks. These are immigrants. These are immigrant communities. These are the communities and the families that built our city, my own included. So I want to be welcoming to every single one. They look different now. They're from different communities in different parts of the world, but they are adding every bit to the strength of our community that those that came before them did. So what do we need to do better? I've met with the Syrian community. I've met with the Iraqi community. I've listened to them. They are hungry for work. They want more English language classes. They want the training that they received in their own countries to be able to translate here so that they can get out and make a living for their family. These are hardworking people. A number of weeks ago, I was lucky to go on a tour of just the developments, just the markets on Parade Street that are owned by new Americans. And these are places that are bustling with activity. They're new businesses where businesses did not exist before. This is an essential part of our population growth. It's an essential part of our economy. And I doubt you'll find a place where my opponent and I differ more on how we will treat the folks that are coming here to our community. And let me be clear, we need to protect our citizens and protect our police by making sure that our policies are very clear, how we interact with federal law enforcement, what our true responsibilities are, and making sure that our neighbors know their rights so that they're protected as well. A mayor needs to be a mayor for all.
And may I just have one very brief moment? What Daria just said is essentially a laundry list of the problems that we face when we don't carefully vet individuals who are coming in. Again, anyone who is coming here with a good purpose, I welcome them. But English language training costs money. Careers that do not translate well from their own countries, that's going to cost money to fix. Poverty issues. The city is deeply struggling, and we need to focus on our own people first.
I just want to say, Mike, these are our own people as well.
Daria, this next question is for you. At the time of this taping, no state budget, we're in a federal shutdown. What would you do to overcome the gaps and the obstacles?
So, when I was at the Erie School District, it was actually the year that there was this much of a delay in our state budget that led to the crisis that happened in Erie's public schools. So I think it's important for people to note, you might not think that what goes on in Washington and Harrisburg impacts you, but that all rolls down to what is happening here locally. So, our current city budget relies a great amount on grants. We have great concerns about the future of those grants if we don't see changes in the federal and state budget. We need to make sure that we're filling the gaps where we can. We know that our budget is limited. We know that we can't do everything, but we need to both fill the gaps, but I would even say more, we need to advocate. And this is not just at a time when we're in a budget impasse or when there's a crisis. We need to be advocating for our community in Harrisburg and in Washington all the time. And I said this in the primary, I think this was a failure of the last administration frustration. I think if you go back in history, you'll find other mayors did this better. That's the kind of mayor I will be, in Harrisburg, in DC, advocating in good times and bad for what our city needs. That's at the top of the list.
Matthew, what would you do to overcome the gaps, the obstacles we could be facing?
Right. So my opponent has said in a previous interview, and she's reaffirmed it here, that she would spend an awful lot of time in Washington, D.C. and Harrisburg. Let me say, the Erie mayor, I believe, should spend most of his or her time in Erie. Erie city government has extraordinarily limited control over what happens in Washington, D.C. and Harrisburg. But what we can do is we can plan ahead. We can balance the budget. We can make sure that we are not dependent on things like grants, that we are not constantly dependent on state funds, that we are not dependent on handouts from Washington. The CRIZ is a fantastic start to that because it's keeping our tax dollars here. We want to do more of that if humanly possible. The federal shutdown, like all federal shutdowns, will end. It may cause temporary inconvenience, but it's going to end. The parties are going to come together and they're going to figure something out. But we need to make sure that we're not dependent on what happens there.
Mike, I just want to say the CRIZ is here because somebody advocated for Erie, because our legislators went down and fought for it. And I would tell you that when we were facing a budget crisis in Erie's public schools, it was because of our presence in Harrisburg that we were able to bring home a $14 million increase in our state subsidy. Now, we did that with our legislators, and I'm not saying I need to do it all by myself, but we need to be advocating actively, and I will always be doing that for Erie.
Veterans are another large part of our population here in the community. So Matthew, to you first, how would you go about improving veteran services here and educational opportunities for our veterans to make sure that they're not on the margins?
Yeah. So as an attorney through the Public Defender's Office, I've worked extensively with the Erie Soldiers and Sailors Home to help veterans who struggle with homelessness, who struggle with various other crises in their lives. The Veterans Authority here helps provide access to medical care, and we need to be partnering with them. I've also worked extensively with the Erie County Veterans Court, helping get clients into treatment, so I'm aware of the resources that are out there in our community. The Erie County Veterans Court has done a wonderful, wonderful job of helping guide veterans who come back, maybe face some, it's obviously not all veterans, but may face some addiction issues. As far as jobs, economic opportunities, and schooling are concerned. And I will say this, I've also been an employee of the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Human Services. And I know how to guide people if they are really struggling, if they do need resources in terms of where to go for that. But we can offer veterans opportunities. I think that I'd be particularly eager to hire American veterans to work at City Hall. Obviously, I'm going to look at every part of someone's resume, but I believe that we can, get more veteran presence there. And I also think that veterans could be a helpful part of keeping our school children safe. That's been proposed elsewhere. I'd like to see it happen in Erie as well.
Same question, Daria.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So, I never served in the military, and nor did my husband and nor did my father. And so I have great respect for those that have, because we've never had to make that much of a sacrifice as a family. I now have 3 sons, all in their 20s, and I think often about whether they would be called to that and how I would be proud, but how worried I would be. So I am so grateful to all our veterans and their families for the sacrifices that they've made. I think homelessness is a place that we can really talk about supporting veterans here. The City of Erie doesn't really have funds or programs within the city. I think we can work with the county on this, but homelessness is a place we can help. So the Erie Housing Authority of the City of Erie has vouchers. They're called VASH vouchers. They're set aside specifically for veterans. We need to make sure those are getting into the hands of our vets, and if we need more, we need to be working. The mayor's office has appointment power on the Housing Authority, so if we see needs within housing, we need to be using those appointments in those authorities to get the things that our residents need. So that would certainly be a place to start. I also think about workforce training programs. So in my prior career at ECAT, we have free workforce programs. Of course, the programs at the community college, we need to be connecting our veterans to that so that we can thank them for what they've done for us and make sure that their and their families' lives are insured into the future.
Before we get to the closing statements, just a real quick response on this one. Where do you expect, Daria, the city to be 4 years, 8 years from now? 20 seconds or less.
20 seconds on that. Look, we're going to get our population numbers up. And I'm going to say right now, you know, if elected mayor, hopefully I have 3 terms. I'd love to run for them. If we have all 12 years, we have to get those population numbers up. I see a Bayfront that's booming. I see a booming arts industry. I see small businesses that have been grown. I see neighborhoods that are coming back to life. They might look different than they did, but they are coming back to life. I see an economy that's booming, and I see numbers going up, and I will stand on that.
Matthew, real quick, what do you see us 4 years from now?
4 years from now, I would expect to see a 10,000 person population growth. I want to see a city where a woman can walk down 5th or 6th Street in the middle of the night and not have a single concern about her safety. I want to see a city where people are eager to come instead of having to beg them to stay. I want to see a city where people are fixing up their own homes, where we're seeing both individual funds and private equities cleaning up the city streets and cleaning up the blight issue.
All right, time for the closing statements. Matthew, you're first.
Thank you. What we want to see most of all is participation in this election. Whether you choose to vote for my opponent or for myself, we know that the City of Erie has great potential. We know that all that's needed is to unlock that potential. And we're asking that everyone, regardless of party, regardless of background, come out to vote in November, go to the courthouse, vote by mail if possible, because when you request a mail-in ballot, then even if you have an emergency on election day and are unable to get to the polls, then you're going to be able to vote. Worst that can happen is if you do decide to vote on election day, all you have to do is take that mail-in ballot to the polls with you, turn it over to them, and they'll let you vote in person. We're just asking that people do their civic duty, participate, and come out and be part of the process. And I think that's also the key to reducing some of the angst and violence that we've seen in our nation, just getting people to participate.
Daria, Devlin?
You know, Mike, we've talked about a lot of things tonight, and I think, you know, my opponent and I don't agree on many of them. But 2 things we definitely agree on. Number 1, this city is full of potential, and number 2, we need our citizens to vote. And so I wholeheartedly agree, regardless of how you vote, where you vote, who you're going to vote for, please take this local election seriously. It impacts your life so much more than many of those others. But let me say this, I have a vision for Erie. I have been built, in my opinion, to lead this city forward into its next chapter. We are going to build a resilient Erie, a stronger Erie, an Erie that's full of growth, an Erie that realizes that potential. I am humbly asking for your vote on November 4th because I promise you, I am ready to lead on day 1, and no one is ever going to work harder for this city than I will. I love it, I will lead it, I ask for your vote, and thank you so much for being with us today.
So we'd like to say thank you to both of our candidates for participating in the debate, and on behalf of Erie News Now and WQLN, thank you for joining us for this election 2025 debate.
And remember, November 4th, get out and vote, and remember to return your mail-in ballot, which must be in the voter office by 8 p.m. on election night. Get out and vote.
We certainly hope that we helped you to make informed decisions when you do go out and vote, and thank you again for watching.
Thank you.